And everyone is doing that uh, every month. So when I was there, one of the people that I was staying with, Jeremy Solomons, he asked me, could I feel the peace on the morning of Umuganda? And so I went outside in the streets, and the streets were completely silent. I saw one person sweeping. And as I walked around the neighborhood, there weren't any cars. You don't drive also from this 8 to 11. There's no cars. And there had been a very, very busy street where you could almost get run over if you didn't realize how to run across. And it was completely silent. I think that they also are law-abiding as a community. They respect laws. The police are friendly and stern, so people want to they want to do their best, and they want to participate in society, and having laws is part of that. So the Umuganda is a law, and about 80% of the people participate. And there is a fine if you are caught. There is a fine also. It's $5 in US, but that's a lot of money for them. Just, some fun facts about the traffic. We wanted to rent a car. And my colleague, Ted Scambos, was very upset that he was told, you really don't need to rent a car, and you really shouldn't rent a car. He was like, oh, I've driven all over the world. Well, after we were in traffic, we realized that they know when to go, they know when to not go. You've got the motos or motorcycles, you've got the cars, you've got the bicycles, you've got mostly people walking. And it is an extraordinary movement that you have to know what you're doing. And it's a very amazing to watch. I think the key, some of the lessons, they realize I don't feel like they're victims. That was the biggest, one of the biggest things is I'm not a victim. We have some responsibility for what happened. Yes, it has colonial roots. In the museum, they tell you all about how the Germans first were the first people to be colonialists, and then it was the French, and then it was the Belgians. The Belgians have apologized. The French have not. But the museum tells us what happened. But what they said was, before colonialism, we were one people. And it is also against the law to refer to people as the different tribes. So there were 3 tribes, but you don't talk about that. They're all Rwandans. They do tell their stories. When you're riding in a car, all of a sudden somebody will start telling their story. When you are in a restaurant and you have a few minutes, somebody will tell the story. And of course, living with the family for 10 days, I heard a lot of stories. I started with the putting a few fingers together, because this is called positive intelligence. It's one exercise from positive intelligence, and I was studying that last year. I didn't realize how affected I was by some of the exercises that we learned. And so at one point, I'd heard 3 stories in the matter of 20 minutes. And I mean, I'm talking about stories, for example, a pregnant woman hiding in the bushes and men urinating on her, and her not being able to say anything so she wouldn't be found. Or someone in an attic in pouring rain. The genocide happened during the rainy season, raining buckets and buckets for days and days. And a woman was stuck in the attic for that long, not being able to say anything. And it goes on from there. And I found myself rubbing my fingers together as a way to center myself, and as a way to hear the stories and take in and listen, and then process the information physically and being able to release it. I think that Rwanda also is learning from their mistakes. They're learning, moving on. You know, one woman said, you know, I cried and cried for so long and I just couldn't cry anymore. And then when I got married, my husband, who's not Rwandan, kept reminding me to smile and helping me come back into life. And she said so I've moved on. She said, my mother has not moved on, and that's hard because there's nothing that we can say or do because she lost half of her family. And yet the modeling of the smiling and the happiness is infectious. They're also very humble people. And I think that that is the key. So when somebody says, yes, we had responsibility, instead of blaming the colonialists, that is the first step for humility, and it's extraordinary. I'm going to show you some pictures now, and just to get a feel how beautiful it is. You know, we have many wars on our planet now, and you think about the beautiful places in the world that are being destroyed. And Rwanda has places that aren't there anymore. And again, it's a beautiful, inspiring place.
Yeah.
So the land of 1,000 hills at night, at sunset, and these are some masks at the market. They've got a beautiful statue downtown. Everybody's taking pictures in front of it. These are my hosts, Merve and Jeremy, and their son, Max. And Jeremy is a peacemaker by trade. That's one of the things he calls himself. And so Max is a little peacemaker. And then my friend from South Africa, Natalie. There's growth everywhere. This is the hotel. This was the foyer in the hotel where we stayed, the sunrise. This is an evening shot of one of the buildings. So the juxtaposition, every level of society lives together. So you've got farms next to huge apartment buildings, next to hotels. You've got modest houses. You've got houses with tin roofs, and they're all mixed in. And then here's the shot of what the traffic looked like most of the time. Threw a little food in. You know, the food was good and healthy. There's nothing that stands out for me except for it was healthy. This is a beautiful table I found in a neighborhood. There was an art gallery and a woodworker, and my partner's a woodworker, so that was fun. And then an art museum that I think we walked 2 hours because we couldn't find it. Clothing everywhere, the way things were displayed was really fun and bright, and you know, a hot dog stand. This is Hotel Rwanda, a statue in front of Hotel Rwanda. You may have seen the movie. Just so you know, that man actually was a criminal, and he was tried and convicted later after the genocide. So it sounded like he was protecting people and keeping people safe. What he was doing was, if people couldn't pay, he eventually kicked them out. So he wasn't really doing anything for safety. He was doing it for personal gain. So Africa in general is a young continent. So Rwanda and Africa, the average age is 19. So it's an up and coming continent, and it's a place where we need to have relations and good relations. I've had a lot of conversations after after I left. I'm still continuing to talk to people. And, you know, somebody said that the heartbreak for Africa and the rest of the world was when the rest of the world was being modernized. People came to Africa. There wasn't a partnership of helping Africa catch up. And so there was sadness about that. And so there's some blame and there's some shame around that when in some ways they wanted to partner. And in some ways, Rwanda did partner, and that was the roots of colonialism and thereby the genocide. So it's a very mixed, complex, and I am not a geopolitical person, so I only know a little bit. But I do know that the children, particularly in the rural areas, were amazing and friendly. And these kids in the middle were waving at us just as we were driving by. We weren't even standing there. This picture here, there was a young photographer, and my friend Natalie gave her camera to this kid, and he took some amazing pictures. And then I just think this is so sweet that to friends walking home from school. And then again, when you see the agriculture in between modern society, and people literally are carrying everything from buckets of cement upstairs to small baskets of fruit and vegetables. This is what they feed the cows, and you can't see the person, but she's carrying something, bananas. And this is, I can't remember what crop that was, but it's a stunningly beautiful place and very difficult to imagine the atrocities there. More carrying. It's kind of funny. My partner, Henry Bergeson, doesn't like to travel. And one of the reasons he doesn't is because he's a woodworker and he's working boots on the ground. His view of travel is I'm going and seeing other people working and staring at what they're doing. And I would just rather do my work. So I sent him a bunch of pictures of people working. And these are, this is a wonderful place, Handspun Hope, which has an executive director and founder from Texas. And they have given about 50 women, 300 women from the genocide jobs. And they have a farm, they shear the sheep, they clean the wool, they dye the wool, they make the sweaters, and it's an amazing organization. Handspun Hope. Views everywhere. So this first one was by the restaurant where I was having breakfast. And this one is coming back from seeing some of the animals in the countryside. So just stunning all the time. And then the animals. So many people, one of the things I'm trying to integrate within myself is that a lot of times when people say they go to Africa, they go to see the animals, they go to safari. I never wanted to go on a safari because I thought it was, in a way, kind of rude to go to a country and just watch animals and leave. Someone told me recently that they wanted to trek lions for 3 weeks in South Africa. And there's so much culture in South Africa. And I just can't imagine not connecting with the people. So that's why I started off with the people. The animals are amazing. So the zebras and the giraffes, the hippos, the warthogs, the water buffaloes. So we were in a Jeep seeing all the animals, and I've got videos too, but that was fun. And then the highlight is that there are 1,000 mountain gorillas left in the world. Betty White, who passed away, the famous actress, and there was a friend here, a colleague, who helped Betty White, and they started with 250 gorillas and raised money. So now there's more. Ellen DeGeneres, I always mispronounce her name, DeGeneres, has a museum outside of where the mountain gorillas are, and educating people that can't afford to get the permit to see the gorillas, but it's a 360 theater. So you feel like you're there, even though you may not be able to afford to go there. Myself and Natalie in a beautiful countryside picture as we were going to see the gorillas. A funny story is we were in the living room of the gorillas. We did have masks and we were quiet and there were a lot of pictures. And they do that beating of the chest that you see in movies. They do that. And so I caught one of them doing that. And then you kind of want to do it because they're doing it. And the guides said, you are telling them that you are stronger than they are if you do that. So please stop. All right. So I do have one video, African dance, to show you. Let's see. All right, let's see. Nope. Can you see that? Oops. All right. So end on an upbeat note. That was the entertainment for a conference. I spoke at a climate conference while I was there, and they ended with this amazing gala of 4 different kinds of African dance and song. And again, to show the spirit of the people, the leader and founder of the dance group passed away during the performance. It was announced behind the scenes to the dancers at intermission, and they came back and finished the performance. So just amazing. And Fran Field, I want to thank you again for connecting me to your son, Carl, and his wife, Mary, that was responsible for me having such an amazing time.
Thank you.
So what? Yeah, you're welcome.
So we have one question in the chat, and just a reminder for anybody who may have joined after we started, that if you'd like to share any questions, you can either direct message to me or put it in the chat for everyone to see. We have a question from Kendall, who asks, were Tutsi survivors given a structured opportunity to have the suffering that they've experienced recognized by the Hutus? And if so, how was that done? He was wondering if the South African Truth and Reconciliation process informed the Rwandan process as they also sought to move forward with the work of forgiveness and reconciliation.
Yes, absolutely. They borrowed that process and in fact, managed to make it very successful. Whereas in South Africa, it started out to be successful and it hasn't been as successful. So things like many people left Rwanda and have never been prosecuted. Some people came back and said, you know, I do want to come back. Here's what I did. They went to a council of people and were given a sentence of, it could be community service, it could have been jail, it could have been banishment. So, but it was a fair process that everybody felt like they they could hear the crimes, they could hear the stories, they could appreciate what happened and move on. And today it is still successful. And there are still people that if they want to come back, they can still do that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned the role of apology as an opportunity, and I was wondering if you could say a little bit more of that about the formal, the role of having a formal place for apology and sort of weaving that into now culture and community as being something that is part of human interaction.
Well, yeah. When I think about apology, I think about the French not apologizing and the Belgians apologizing. And it was so powerful that they decided to take French out of the schools and replace it with English.
Wow.
So you have people before that, a lot of people still speak French. And it's not necessarily by age, because when in a restaurant, there was a young woman who was very fluent in French. And so it's not necessarily by age. I don't know if it was different communities started and stopped the language at different times. But yeah, it's the power of just saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I understand now what happened. Brings so much grace and clears so much if you do it, if you mean it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then I would also say that part of, I mean, I don't know, again, the details of the reconciliation process that they do, but I do know part of it is to say, here's what I did. And to go back and say that people, they don't talk about their stories among each other. They don't name the different tribes, because if you start talking and all of a sudden somebody realizes that it was their father that killed your sister and you're having dinner, I mean, so you don't explain any of that. You go to the formal process if you want to be forgiven. But in the streets and among people, there's just no need for that because they've moved on in the community as a society.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about the average age being 19, right? You said, and if this was almost, it looks like that, almost exactly 30 years ago, right?
Yes, next month.
So that's that's a
Yeah.
different generation.
Yeah, so I guess luckily there are people that didn't experience. And in a way, so I also want to say that it's not all, light and rainbows. They know that they need healing as a community. There are 13 million people in the country. And in Kigali, the capital, they say that they need group healing. They talk about it. So, and they don't smile. I haven't been to other parts of Africa, so I don't know smiling as a norm. But that was hard for me, being from the US and being who I am, to walk down the street and not smile. Now, if you make eye contact and you smile, people will respond. But as a general rule, they're not smiling. And someone will say, well, there's not a lot to smile about. We work hard. We've had a terrible history. So the gravity of the situation is still there. And I do think there's a little bit of a separation between people who have the stories of the genocide and people who don't. So the reason I know the story about the woman hiding in the bushes who's pregnant, because I met her son. Luckily, she's alive. Her son was born. And actually, her son made my jacket.
Oh, wow.
So there are a lot of happy stories. Yeah.
Oh, I see another question. John Luggy, I think, writing, I was always amazed by the almost non-existent sense of grudge or resentment that we encountered in Guatemala while serving there as missionaries. The US intentionally took actions that led to the fall of the legally elected government there, which in turn led to a 36-year civil war. We were loved and respected by people who had every reason to hate us. It's still hard for me to understand how they are able to forgive so fully.
You know, what that, I don't know the answer, but what it reminds me of is that my father spent a huge part of his life wanting to be a business person. And he had a business for the last 20 years of his life, technical career placement. It was a headhunting business. And he was sure that someone was going to buy his business. And he befriended a man from Africa, and that the man from Africa, I believe Nigeria, stole the business, stole the employees, stole the files, stole the customers. And to this day, the business exists. So it was a great idea. There is a legacy there. And there are many of us, friends and family, who carry that grudge that that person stole the business. And when I was in Rwanda, the light bulb came on of this is maybe an indigenous, an African practice of letting go. I just saw my father everywhere. And the fact that he let that go before he died was extraordinary to all of us. So if I had any answer at all, I would say that indigenous wisdom requires and encourages us, similar to Christianity and other faiths, that if you dig deep, you can find that forgiveness.
Mm. Thank you. Let me ask Hannah's question, and then I see Fran has a hand up too. Hannah said, on a similar note to John's, were you able to have the chance to speak with people about how they were able to forgive something so aggressive and tragic? For the ones who were there and survived, how does one even begin to recover and heal from that?
Yeah, to me, the key that I heard was we are one people. And that's something that's harder for us to say in the US. They can say that there's a point in time that they were one people, and then we can go back to that. Unity is part of our value. And if we keep doing this, we'll just destroy everything in the future. We want to have a future. And I think also, again, like you said, having a different generation continuing that, not knowing all the details, it's easier to move on when you haven't personally experienced some things.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Fran, I'm going to ask you.
It tears you up inside. One other thing is, it tears you up inside when you're holding that kind of energy.
Mm.
So I think that, a wise person realizes that it's not healthy to do that. And then one other thing I'm thinking about as well, the museum that tells the whole story, that they were able to say, this is the seed of what happened. And it happened because people came here for personal gain and created this situation. So again, they aren't victims, but they are acknowledging the seed of the genocide. And I think that's helpful as well. All right.
Thank you. Yeah. Fran.
Well, thank you, Leilani, for this. I'm so glad you were able to share it. But I just have a story about the genocide. And this is a number of years ago at the School of Christian Missions. And I can't even remember her name. In fact, I can't remember her parents' name. Her father was in the Minnesota Conference, ordained minister, and her mother was very active in UMW at the time. But anyway, as I say, I can't remember her name. She, at the time, she was on the UN Committee for Refugees, and she was in the field at that time in Rwanda. And in fact, I can still hear the story, and I still get kind of chills when I hear it. But she was telling about at the end of the genocide, and she talked about the numbers and hundreds of people that came back down from the hills, where they had taken some some refuge. Yeah, I can still remember that. And Carl is in the US right now. He's in Vermont having cataract
Oh,
surgery, and I think he would have joined us because I gave him the ID number. But he's on his way to Virginia, picking up his son, who he's going to bring back to Vermont. And Mary is expected. I think she flies out Friday evening, but otherwise, I think sure he would have joined us.
so when you said, Fran, the people came down from the hills, were they hiding and then came back?
Yes, apparently, here again, hundreds and hundreds of people went to the hills just to be, to be safe. Yeah.
And there are people that aren't so lucky that went to other surrounding countries that have not been able to come back home. And again, it's not my specialty to understand politics in the world. I do know that Rwanda is surrounded by people that some still don't like Rwanda, and there's some tension at the border for sure.
Yeah, it's between the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's a lot going on there right now, right? And Rwanda apparently is part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leilani, I have one final question for you. If someone doesn't throw one in the chat before we close. One of the things I know that you just are passionate about in your work and in your art is the relationship in body and spirit and emotion, and how those are integrated in our experience as human beings walking around with these bodies. And I'm just wondering, from your experience, either some of what you saw in Rwanda, but also just in your own life and work, how you've seen the physical aspects of the work of forgiveness and reconciliation embodied. Has that been something that you have noticed or seen about the relationship that process can have in our physical beings?
Well, you all have a wonderful resource in Minnesota, Resma Minicum. He wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands. And I've been doing physical mind-body work for a long time, and reading his book helped me understand how to frame trauma, generational trauma, and things that have happened to people in their bodies. So I was doing some of it unconsciously, and now I'm very conscious. So yes, we carry trauma in our bodies. And I wonder, part of maybe how people in Rwanda release some of this trauma is that they are very physical. I mean, everybody's walking. There are not that many cars. You're either on a bike or you're walking to everywhere. So, you have to get, trauma does lock in your body. Trauma is in your cells, in your DNA, and you have to move it out. I think that in my work, if you consciously move it out, then it's faster. But even if you don't consciously move it out, if you're moving, you're somehow releasing things that you no longer need that are stuck in your body. And my work started more consciously. I was watching families on the beach, and I would see the families walking the same way. So if somebody had a slight limp, the 3-year-old would be doing that. And there's since research, I just found out that there is actually a study that a father had an injury, and so he was walking a certain way, and his 3-year-old started walking that way and did not have the injury. So, we pick up things, not only mental and emotional, but we pick up physical things, and we can be conscious of how to release that. And, is that, even when I get ill, sometimes I will say, well, now what is this about? Is this me? Am I carrying something that doesn't belong to me? And a lot of times, if I have a sniffle, then it'll be gone the next day because I have looked at the emotional component or the belief system of that, and I can release it. So there's definitely some connections there.
Yeah, thank you. Fran.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the book, and I have read it, but the story behind it is I was in St. Paul, living in St. Paul, and that was right at the time that George Floyd was killed, which was a very awakening time for many of us. But anyway, very young woman at Centennial, where I went to church, got a committee together, and they started, educating and having people read books and so forth and so on, and sharing them. But she was very, very passionate about what she was doing. And I asked her one day, because she had mentioned the book, and I asked her one day, what really got you going so? And that is the book that My Grandmother's Hands, that she mentioned.
Okay.
And yes, it is a good read. Yeah.
Well, and I can say, adding on to that, Fran, is that the book is specifically about racialized trauma in the US. He's very clear that this is a US issue. And there's chapters for police bodies, for white bodies, and for bodies of color. And for Black bodies, I believe. So he makes a distinction if you're multicultural, but you're someone of color, or if you're a Black person, or if you have your job as a police, or if you're white. And the exercises are similar, but just slightly different to get to go into the doorway of the particular experience that you and your ancestors have experienced. And what Resmaa says about that book is that don't read it from cover to cover right away. If it takes you a year, fine. You take an exercise at a time and process and digest as you go along. Yeah, it's beautiful. And then another wise person says, if you don't hand it back, you'll hand it down. So that is the purpose behind integrating and releasing the trauma that you have, so that no one else has to deal with that.
Yeah, it is a rather difficult book. But as you say, I think if you take it slowly, it's much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And John Loggy indicated that the Rochester Library does have an electronic copy of My Grandmother's Hands, but that you'll now need to wait 14 days until John returns it, because he has just checked it out. And my guess is there may be others in the congregation as well. And I think I might look into one for our church library too. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to honor the time that we set up. And thank you again, Leilani, for sharing with us your experiences, your reflections, and graciously answering our questions. I do see Joyce on here as well. Hello, Joyce. So glad to have you here. I want to make sure I honor the chance for you to get to say hello to your daughter on Zoom as well. And we are so glad that all of you are able to be here. If there are any follow-up questions that anyone has, would you be open to receiving those by email, Leilani? I can pass along, write me and I can pass along to you. And so if anybody has any questions.
You could put my email in the chat if that's easier.
Perfect.
Just right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to say thank you for being you. Your mother wants to say the same thing, sweetheart. You're very wise, and you must continue to share your wisdom.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And good looking too. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, thank you for having me. And I challenge you to remember that forgiveness starts with self. And that if you can forgive yourself, it's a lot easier to forgive others, because many times what we're doing to others, we're doing to ourselves anyway.
Absolutely. That connection between how forgiveness as a outward going out and coming in, I think one of the things we're discovering through this Lenten journey is how deeply connected those are. So I appreciate you naming that, how important that is. So thank you again for sharing. I was a little late in hitting the record button because I was so excited to get us started. So I missed just the very first like 5 minutes, but everything else I have recorded and we'll share
Good.
and upload so that we have that, including this question and answer. And we'll thank you again for joining, and thank you all for being part of this.
And how soon will you be with us at church?
Pastor Jenny, we have a workshop together. I
May.
can't remember the date. May. Remember the date?
May something, May 22nd.
Okay,
Yes, that's it. May 20th. It's an evening. It's an evening, 3 hours.
good.
And we will be exploring some of this body-mind connection there.
That's important. Thank you.
All right.
Absolutely.
See you
Thank
soon,
you.
sweetheart. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leilani.